Hey, this is Bert Salazar. I hope that all of you are doing well. This morning, I went ahead and did my weekly podcast, which I do every single week. And this is our number 105th episode. So we have a lot of content there for all of you. But I did a podcast this morning on how to deal with the new realities that we're living through today. Obviously, the coronavirus has made a major impact, not only on a global basis and throughout the United States, but most important to each and every one of us, each and every one of you on an individual basis. And I always like to tell stories and analogies because I think it makes it a lot more feasible to be able to understand and apply to your own situation. And I talked a little bit about when I joined the Marine Corps back in the 70s. I had just turned 18 years of age. And, I had been living in the United States for a number of years. I grew up in Boston. I went to school in Boston. And I decided to give something back because this country had done something so good, not only for me, but also for my family as well. Because they took us in at a time that when we left Cuba under a communist and a dictator regime of Fidel Castro, it was very important for the U.S. to be able to take us in. So we were actually very thankful for what this country had done for us, and I wanted to give something back. So I decided to join the Marine Corps because A, they were looking for a few good men. That was their ad campaign back in the 70s, and I thought I was good enough to be able to join the Marine Corps, and I did. And what's interesting is that when I joined the Marine Corps, I went to this beautiful resort in South Carolina called Parris Island. And Parris Island is where it's the Marine Corps recruit depot where you go for boot camp, or in the military, in the Army, you call it basic training, but in the Marine Corps, you call it boot camp. So I show up to boot camp. I had just turned 18 years of age. I have played baseball, most of my life, and have done all kinds of things, but I had never been in the military. So it was a brand new experience for me. It was my entire world was decimated in less than 24 hours. You go from living a beautiful life where you don't have to worry about anything. You wake up whenever you wake up. I had just graduated, high school, so I was very happy about that. And all of a sudden, I'm in Marine Corps boot camp in Parris Island, South Carolina. So your world and my world changed in less than 24 hours. But one of the things that I learned when I showed up to boot camp, we all get there at 2 o'clock in the morning. And by the way, the Marine Corps has two basic training facilities or boot camp facilities in the United States. They have the one on the East Coast, which is Parris Island. And then all of us that live east of the Mississippi would actually go to PI, Parris Island. And then if you lived west of the Mississippi River, you would go to MCRD San Diego, Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, California. And to make fun of them, we used to call them Hollywood Marines. But then again, I show up to Parris Island. I got there around 2 o'clock in the morning. It's all dark. And all of a sudden, these drill instructors come out. We were right in front of the Marine Corps receiving barracks, and back then they had actual barracks where you lived in. Today they have beautiful buildings and so forth, but at least the receiving barracks were old barracks, from the 40s and the 50s. And I remember when I got to the receiving barracks, right at the very top of the front door, there's a sign that said, the more you sweat in peace, the less you're going to bleed in war. And they took that to heart. I mean, we sweated like you wouldn't believe. We trained every single day, up at 4 o'clock in the morning, training all day and doing all kinds of stuff. But what I did learn in the Marine Corps, and at least in boot camp, and this will go into the financial world, is that whenever you're giving something to do or something changes in your life, you have to be able to adapt, you have to be able to adjust, and you're going to have to be able to improvise, because the world is going to come at you with different things. And what we're going through now with the coronavirus, not only is your personal life being shuffled all over the place, but also your financial life is going to be totally different than what you intended it to. For those of you that may not know this, all these financial losses that you have had in all your retirement accounts, your 401ks becoming 201ks and so forth, the last 4 weeks of these financial losses actually wiped out all of the gains that you had in early 2020, all of the gains that you had in 2019, all of the gains that you had in 2018, and all of the gains that you had in 2017. So that ought to tell you something about the impact of that. The other question you need to be asking yourself is, if a month of a bear market can destroy 3 years of retirement assets and investment assets, then the question is, well, what kind of retirement plan do you have? And I would argue that most of you don't have a retirement plan, because if you've lost it all, then chances are what you have is a hope plan, and hope is not a financial strategy. But getting back to my Marine Corps days, so I spent 12 weeks in this beautiful resort in South Carolina. They treated us really well. It was Marine Corps Bootcamp. It was hell, to the point that I'm very proud of the fact that, number one, I would never want to go through it again. But number two, I am so glad that I actually went through it. And we went through it because the vast majority of things that I do in my personal and my business life goes back to my Marine Corps Bootcamp, because they built a sense of structure, a sense of, semper fi, semper fidelis, always faithful, to my business, to my family, to the core, to this country, to everything that we stand for. So all of those things have played a role in my entire career and in my entire personal life. So I graduated boot camp, ended up being assigned to the 1st Marine Division out of Camp Pendleton, California. So I had never been to the West Coast, so I go to LAX, and then from LAX I go down to Camp Pendleton, which is located between Orange County and San Diego, in a small town called Oceanside, which is now a big town because I lived in California years later. But what I'm about to tell you is also very interesting, because we're all going through this right now, the coronavirus and the bear market, and we can't leave our home and we can't do anything, and we're very limited as to what we're capable of doing. But I show up to boot camp, and the first 30 days after boot camp, I show up to Camp Pendleton. And the 30 days in Camp Pendleton, number one, you have to start learning all the mountains and all the hills in Camp Pendleton, and you do that by running. So they really get you in really, really good shape, and humping and doing all kinds of training exercises. But the first 30 days, you go to what it used to be known ITS school, Infantry Training School. And there you learn something very, very critical. And you go through a training that is called control chaos. Now, we all know that the word control and the word chaos have nothing to do with each other and are seldom together, except that in the Marine Corps, control chaos, they bring it together from a training perspective. And the reason why you have to train under control chaos situations and environment is that everything in your training in the military and the Marine Corps is fine until the first grenade goes off. And then when the first grenade goes off, everything goes to hell. And you have to have the ability under those conditions, under that critical environment and chaotic environment that you're going through, to be able to make the right decision at the right time, for the right reasons, and under the right circumstances. So you need to keep your head above your shoulders while you're going through this chaos in order to survive and make it to the other side. Whether you happen to be in the middle of a firefight in a war, or you're going through the financial challenges and the personal challenges that all of us are going through today. I mean, I can tell all kinds of Marine Corps stories, but control chaos and being able to adapt, adjust, and improvise are critical things that all of us can apply to our personal lives, especially today. Now, what are some of the things that you ought to be doing? Number one, take a look at all your retirement accounts and your investment accounts. Are you have them in the, do you have them in the right sequence? Have you lost any money? How much money have you lost? I know all of you have lost a lot of money, but how much of it have you lost? Have you plugged the holes? Did you go to cash? And if you did go to cash, when will you get back into the market? For those of you that did not go to cash and you're still seeing those account values, I know the market is up today, but last Friday was down again, and it will continue to go down. You know, when are you going to plug the holes? When are you going to stop the bleeding? Because as you very well know, if you lose 40% in the market today, it's going to take a 67% rate of return in 1 year for you to get back to zero. And if you happen to be getting an 8% rate of return after a 40% loss, it's going to take 6.5 years before you can get back to where you were at prior to that 40% loss. But in the meantime, you have taxation and inflation eating at your assets. So there's a very high probability you're never going to get back to where you were at that point in time. And even worse, if you happen to need to take money out of those accounts at a point in time where your assets are depleting in value because you need to maintain your standard of living because you're now in retirement, then you're definitely never ever going to be able to recover. So take a look at those accounts. What are some of the vehicles and tools that are available for you to be able to benefit when the market goes up, but be able to protect that principle that you have in order to minimize the stock market losses or eliminate stock market losses in the future. Second thing you ought to do is go back and do a budget. Take a look at all your fixed expenses and your variable expenses. And if you can do this, this would help you tremendously. Do a line item and go line item by line item and do a line item veto as they do in the government, and eliminate expenses that you could set aside and eliminate altogether. If you can reduce your expenses by 20%, you've done a great job. Now, I know what you're going to say, Bert, you know, it's easier said than done. I know that. But by the same token, if you don't do your due diligence and you don't go through that exercise, then chances are you're just following the definition of insanity, which is doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. It's not going to happen. So you gotta go behind it and go behind the scenes and start doing some due diligence on those accounts. What else can you do from a business perspective? Well, you know, if you own a business, start going through your statement of cash flow. Make sure that you talk to your accountant or your tax preparer and go through the statement of cash flow. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do along those lines. And then, most important, whether you own a small business or you don't, you got to take a look at how your assets are divided, because it's not only the fact that you need to worry about asset allocation, you also have to worry about tax allocation. So you have your taxable bucket, your tax deferred bucket, and your tax-free bucket. Most of you have all of your money in either the taxable bucket or the tax deferred bucket, and you have to think about the following. You know, we may very well come out of this coronavirus situation with an additional $6 trillion in debt. Now remember, our national debt was at $23 trillion and counting, and our unfunded liabilities for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and Medicare Part D was at $126 trillion and counting. And that did not include the impact of the coronavirus and the $2 trillion that we just borrowed, and probably the another $3 to $4 trillion that we're going to have to borrow or actually print money in the next few months in order to take care of the COVID-19 issues that we're dealing with today. So think outside of the box. What do you think it's going to happen in the future? What do you think is going to happen from a taxable standpoint? Do you think that taxes are going to be a lot higher in the future than they are today? I bet to agree that they will be. If they were going to be higher no matter what, can you imagine now? The problem is that now you have, you know, put the foot on the accelerator to the very, very bottom, and now that acceleration is going very, very fast. So there's a very high probability that your taxes are going to double in the future, and there's nothing that you can do. So that means that the 401ks, the IRAs, the TSPs, the 403bs, the retirement accounts that you have, the traditional retirement accounts that you have, you can now sequentially deduct a lot more money going to taxes which means less money going into your pocket. So if you had a $1 million IRA and now it's $500,000 because it became a 201k, the question is, what percentage of that $500,000 will actually belong to you? Do you think it's going to be, what, a 20%? Do you think it's going to be 400,000 that will belong to you? Or will it be a 40% and all of a sudden only 300,000 will belong to you? Will it be a 50% and then all of a sudden only 250,000 will belong to you? See, remember, the money that you have in your tax deferred account, not all of it belongs to you. As a matter of fact, the IRS is going to dictate when it's time to take that money out, how much money they're going to allow you to keep, what percentage of those assets they're going to want for themselves, and they're going to do it, especially in the fact that we're living through one of the worst times in American history after having the best economy in American history only 30 days ago. So again, if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. You can call me at area code 786-766-1042. You can also send me an email at Bert, B-E-R-T, at gablestaxgroup.com. And always remember that my goal for each and every one of you is to help you change the way that you see things, because when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So again, once again, thank you so much for your time today, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.